Hello everyone, welcome back to Curiosities of Staffordshire after quite a long absence. I'm sorry for the lack of videos over the last 8 months, but since changing jobs I've had a lot less time on my hands. But hopefully now we're getting towards summer again, we'll have more nice days and I'll be able to get out and make a few more of these videos. You join me today standing on a piece of common land just outside the town of Stone in Staffordshire, known as Stone Field. And since about 1800 it's been a relatively peaceful piece of common land, just green land used for grazing sheep these days mainly used for dog walkers and just general recreation. But in 1745 this little peaceful field turned into a hive of military activity during the Second Jacobite Rebellion, led by Charles Edward Stuart, the Young Pretender. I'll just give you a quick little bit of background on the Jacobite Rebellion. In 1689, the last Catholic king of England, James Stuart, James II, was deposed in the Glorious Revolution by William of Orange, a Protestant, who later became William III of England, and his entire line, his family line, was forced into exile in France, Charles Edward Stuart being one of them. And up until about 1715, the exile had been fairly peaceful, but with the death of Queen Anne leaving no successors, the line of the English throne passed to the Hanoverian line in the form of George I, who was from Germany, and the Jacobites saw this as an ideal time to strike in about 1715 during the first Jacobite Rebellion, which failed. It's not my area of history, to be honest, so I don't know all the details on that. But in the 1740s, the majority of the British army, now under George II, was fighting abroad in the War of the Austrian Succession on the continent. And, of course, most of the British army was preoccupied with this, so the Jacobites again saw another chance to strike. Charles Edward Stuart, the Young Pretender, who had been gathering a lot of support in Scotland, in France, and later in Scotland, managed to sail into the Highlands, where he gathered the support of a lot of the Highland clans and was able to put together an army in order to invade England. And at first they won a couple of very good victories in Edinburgh, and then pressed on into England, where they won victories at Carlisle, and then later Preston, where they marched into the town to jubilant cheers from the crowds. And it seemed that the Jacobite Rebellion was gathering a lot of support for the Stuarts, and it was thought that they might press on down to London, with the majority of the army being away. And of course that means passing through the Midlands. And in late 1745, after Preston had fallen, in around about October-November time, a sort of hasty army was gathered as the army started to be recalled from continental Europe in order to mount a defence. And on this very site here, just outside of Stone, the Duke of Cumberland managed to rally an army of basically leftovers and battalions returning from the continent. He managed to gather some 15 battalions of foot soldiers and about 6 of dragoons and cavaliers. But even so, it was probably not enough to be facing some 7,000 supporters of Bonnie Prince Charlie marching down on him. And so they actually had to throw up a quick defence just outside of the town of Stone, where much of the army was also encamped. And this is Stone Field, where the defence was hastily constructed. We're looking north now towards Stoke-on-Trent, so we're sort of looking in the direction that Bonnie Prince Charlie's army would have been coming from. And I'm actually standing now on the brow of the promontory here, where the Duke of Cumberland's defence would have been mounted. I'm going to pick up the camera and we're going to have a look around. So turn the camera this way. The most interesting feature of this landscape is this area behind me here. As you can see, it's a bit overgrown these days, but it's full of these little mounds. Now I guess if you didn't know the history of this area, they look innocent enough. They could just be like natural little hills, or maybe the result of mining or something like that, as you would assume in Staffordshire. But in fact, according to local legend, these were the mounds constructed for the defence of Stone against the Jacobite Rebellion. and these mounds, one of which I'm standing on right now, were in fact where they would have placed the artillery and the cannons facing the direction of the north. And behind me we've got these sort of trenches and parapets here to mount what would have been a bit of resistance, at least probably enough to slow down Bonnie Prince Charlie's army, enough for the rest of the army to return from the continent and drive him back. Let's put the camera down again. Now, sadly this tale isn't going to end with the story of an epic battle fought on this site, because in fact the battle never took place, as Bonnie Prince Charlie's army headed towards Derby, which is to the east of here instead. And from that point on, the Jacobite Rebellion pretty much stopped in its tracks, as news of battalion after battalion and regiment after regiment reporting back from the continent in order to oppose him. They decided in the end not to lay siege to Derby on the advice of his military commanders. And as I've said, he had quite a formidable army, so chances are he probably would have been able to take Derby and press on towards London, but they decided that the damage caused to his army and the amount of time it would have taken to lay siege to Derby, they decided not to. And it was quite a fateful decision really, because from then on they decided to retreat back to Scotland, where they were pursued by the British army and eventually completely crushed or slaughtered, massacred, depending on whose point of view you follow, at the infamous Battle of Culloden just outside of Inverness, which pretty much put an end to any further Jacobite rebellions and any rebellions from the Stuart line for a very long time. And it was a battle that left a massive mark on history. And yeah, I guess it's a little known fact that it could have all come to a head right here in Stone, which these days is quite a quiet little town on the canal, pretty much in between Stafford and Stoke and the much bigger city of Stoke-on-Trent. But yeah, I guess in 1745 it was exciting times around here. And the town of Stone itself does have a few more connections with history around about that time, with various figures from the Jacobite Rebellion apparently trying to hide in Stone and escape over the border to Wales and that kind of thing. But yeah, lots of local little stories like that. And yeah, it's just I guess it's interesting what you can find in your own backyard. So this town, this area, like I said, Stonefield, just outside of Stone as you head towards Method and on towards Stoke-on-Trent. The little bit at the top that I showed you, the cannon mounds, are known locally as the Mudleys. I'm not entirely sure where that name comes from, but that's what they're known as in these parts. So yeah, another interesting little piece of history you may not have known about Staffordshire. We'll just end the video with a few more shots of the Mudleys themselves. I'm standing sort of right on the edge of it here. Apologies for the shakiness, I forgot the Steadicam today unfortunately. As you can see, they're quite extensive really. I'm sort of standing right in the middle now. This time I'm standing on the other side, the Stone side if you will, and we'll just finish with a quick panoramic view of what potentially could have been the battlefield had things had turned out differently. And just one last quick shot looking towards the Mudleys from the north. There they are in the distance, right at the top of the hill, in probably the best strategically defendable position around. Again, thank you very much for your patience. as I sort of took all these shots as a bit of an afterthought. But yep, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.